there was no attachments and expectations of you, and there was no, like, money is no object, time is no object, the world is your oyster, what do you want to do? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world?
Hello and welcome back to the Finding You podcast. Today I have with me Seryna. Hello.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do.
I am a sacred transformation mentor who helps women who are stepping into their next level you, as I like to call it, and they're having some issues with that, some activation of their courage and their confidence, anything that they need to be able to take up more space and claim everything that their heart desires. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, what I do. I help those women.
And you do some work with sacred anger. Could you give us a bit of explanation about that?
Yeah. So for the last, I want to say 12 years, I've been doing some really deep inner work. I've worked with energy healers and shamans, and I was kind of seeing the shadow side of light work. So it was very much like, just love and light it away, and you just need to stay positive. You got to be part of the high vibe tribe. And I found that was actually dismissing a really big part of the work that we do. And the more that I dug into that as a curiosity, I started recognizing even within myself that I was denying my own anger and my own sacred rage and trying to pretend that if I could just stay positive, that would be enough. And it wasn't. And because this pattern kept coming up for myself in my own healing, and then also with clients, I started to sort of trace it and track it and get a little curious for a while. And it ended up turning into a book that I launched earlier this year that was really about the lessons that are held in this really powerful emotion.
Wow. And what sparked your journey to start your own healing?
There was a bit of a sneak attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not. So I was raised Catholic, and I was a spiritual kid growing up, and I always had a real interest in everything magical and mystical. But because I was Catholic, that was, frowned upon, to say the least. For my teen years, I kind of actually shut a lot of that off, with the exception of reading cards. I started reading tarot when I was 14, so it's been like a year or two. But because life was hard, let's be honest, I just started to shut down, and all these kind of layers kept kind of just protecting me from everything that I felt on the outside world. And a friend of mine was doing some work with a shaman, and he said, yeah, this is a tool that is going to help you to get to know yourself better. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's great. And I really thought what I was entering into was like a psychological exercise, and it was. But if you're familiar with the plant medicine ayahuasca, that was the beginning of my journey. And so I signed up for what I thought was just a way to understand myself better, and what I ended up accessing was my own divinity and how to connect with the divine as a whole. And so at that point, once you know, you can't unknow it. And the last 12 years from that point, or 13 or something now, I'm losing track, has just been shedding all those layers I had built up and really getting back to like the truest part of myself.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I really find plant medicines really cool. I've never experienced it, but I want to, because I think it's just so fascinating. Could you give us a bit of story as to what your experience was like?
So the thing that's really interesting with a medicine like ayahuasca is that you can talk about an experience, but they're never the same, even when it's the same person. We used to do them in weekend workshops, so you would do it 2 nights, and one night to the other night, you were having completely different experiences. But if I was going to speak in kind of more general terms, it starts off with sort of a bit of a relaxation, and then it goes into almost like a distracting hallucinogenic. Like for me, I would see almost like kaleidoscope kind of patterns that would move. And then before I had sat down, I would have set an intention. And so from that point forward, it's almost like my highest self, the divine, and my unconscious mind kind of get together and would bring me visuals or emotions or sensations. And sometimes it was memories that I was reliving, and I could have it just have a new perspective of how I experienced it. Sometimes it was, other realities. I was at my own funeral, as a for instance. And sometimes it was just communicating with guides. It was different every time. But, when you experience something like that, you are forever changed. You know what I mean? It was very much a life before and a life after.
Yeah, wow. And so just an explanation for people that have never heard of plant medicines and completely unsure. Can you explain the whole ritual side of it and how you really do step into a very sacred space?
Yeah, that's a really big part of it too, because who is facilitating is really, really important. You want to make sure that you are working with someone who this is their heritage, that they are actually trained in the lineage of whatever medicine it is that they're working with. You want someone who's really respecting the medicine, who is working with plants that have been harvested ethically and that everything is like really protected, and someone that is actually a safe person. And because you are in these altered states, you don't have the same sort of abilities. So if you think about like somebody that you might go and like go to the bar with, even, you're not going to go to the person who's like kind of gropey. You're right. You're going to go out with the people that are that you know you're safe with, so that if you are in a place where you're a little uninhibited, that you're going to be okay. And so having someone really trusted is really important. So when we talk about plant medicine, like ayahuasca is like pretty up there in terms of depth, but I mean, some people have even used like mushrooms or even marijuana in this way, where what you're doing is not a recreational thing. And there are sometimes where it's fun, but sometimes where it's very not fun. The kaleidoscopes I mentioned sometimes would be so intense I would vomit. So it's really not like, woohoo, let's do this for a good time on a Friday night. It really is truly inner work. And how I think also like when you bring intention to it, and in the case of like certain medicines like ayahuasca, you actually have to cleanse beforehand. So you're only eating certain foods and you're really cleaning up your diet so that you don't have adverse reactions. That kind of preparation stage and the intention setting, and then the actual ceremony itself, like that, I feel is the ritual. And even maybe the integration time afterward.
And how long do you have for like integration time afterwards?
So it depends on what you're doing. So what we would do is we would have our ceremonies, and then we'd have like 2 weeks, and then we would regather after the 2 weeks. There was always a sharing. Some people do it immediately after a ceremony. Some people, in our case, would do it the day after. But then there was also like that 2-week check-in was sort of like, hey, so since you're forever changed, especially if this was your first time, you okay? How did that go? And how are you feeling? Because, it is really, once you start to see the world in this way, once you have been cracked open, because you're no longer holding up all these shields around your heart, it is a very vulnerable way to be, and sometimes you just need a little extra support to be able to process that.
That's so beautiful, the aftercare of it all. And just the beautiful notion that you are being taken care of through the process. And so with the work you're doing now and with working with clients and whatnot, do you suggest that they do the same sort of thing, or you take them through a whole other process?
So I personally do not facilitate plant medicine. That is not my world at all. It was something that was the beginning of my path and opened me up. But I'm not a trained facilitator, and also that's not my lineage. So I wouldn't be able to do it justice, if I'm totally honest. The way I work with plant medicine, which is not like an ingesting thing, like I work with essential oils. I work with crystals, which isn't so much plant, but earth medicine. So I kind of do it in that way. A lot of the time, though, my sessions have nothing to do with any of that. That is, our sessions are really about asking questions, about self-exploration, about really working with the energy of like what is being said and what's not being said, because I'm really finely tuned to the unspoken, I guess is a way to put it. And I facilitate often with directive from someone's angels or guides, because that's just the kind of way I've been doing this work. So it's, do I recommend it? I think someone needs to be in the right headspace. And I think also they will know for sure within themselves if this is for them or not. But it's really important that you're in like a really solid frame of mind to be able to do that type of work too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so can you talk a bit on how you work with people's guides and their higher self?
Because of the way that I facilitated for the last several years, I use all of my tools at all times. So I'm trained in mediumship, I'm trained in angel communication. And like I said, I've been reading cards, since I was like young. And so I've kind of always brought all of my skills to the table. And then I have kind of an agreement with my own guides that they're going to help me know what to say and when to say it, and just the right things will come forward. There are times where we will explicitly speak to someone's highest self. Someone's inner child is also a really big one that we work with. We bring in lessons from the shadow, but we do it in a way that feels really safe and supported, so someone's comfortable to actually go into those unexplored parts of themselves. The thing is that there isn't any, it's not a cookie cutter session, right? It's very much about the right tool at the right time. And so in my own personal development, I like to just keep pulling in like all the skills that I can use and leverage in a session so that someone can be supported in the way that, is most supportive to them.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. With your training in mediumship, can you explain about that? Because how do you train in that sort of thing? That is so fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm a trained medium who doesn't talk to dead people, which is like a super weird thing to say. So for me, because when I was young, I had some really scary experiences, which is what shut down my gifts for so long. I was really hesitant to open up. And I was just starting my angel training, but I kept holding back because I was really scared, is really what it came down to. And I wanted to be able to have boundaries of being able to hear my guides and my own guidance a lot with more clarity, and not just with a feeling, but actually hear it or see it and have kind of a richer sensual experience with being able to communicate with the other side. But I didn't want to talk to dead people. So I trained in mediumship. The big nudge of it was maybe a couple months before it happened. I was having a full moon ritual in my backyard, and my stepfather, who'd passed away a few years before, I could see him reflected in the patio doors. And of course that scares the crap out of you, because he wasn't supposed to be there. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. You're in my patio door. That's really weird. And that was where it was kind of like, okay, rather than being afraid of this, like, let's get some tools under my belt so that I can navigate this with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more clarity. And then really, I just took everything I learned as a medium and applied it to angels and ascended masters and even ancestors and lineage, because I did not want to talk to dead people. So it's really the same skill set. It's just what frequency you're tuning into.
Right. So now you have, I suppose, the boundary of not allowing anyone who is dead or is got negative energy to enter your space.
Yeah, it's an ongoing boundary though. And particularly right when somebody passes, I notice, because I'm kind of like the weird one in my social groups, like they know she's the one who talks to dead people. So I definitely feel it when someone crosses over. I'll be like, okay, and I have to reestablish that boundary. And I do that with angels. Like I would say anytime I'm worried about the energy being a bit wonky, so staying in hotels, or even the place I lived before, like a young woman had died in that house. I just would set the boundaries and set the almost like bubbling up. So it's like clearing the energies of the home and then bubbling up so nothing can come in. And I do that with the angels and with energy as well.
Wow. Okay. And so how do you set those sort of boundaries? And I'm asking for like my own personal thing as well as like informing other people, because I find it so interesting when you walk into a space and the energy feels a bit off and you have to somehow just protect it. And often you don't even have sage or anything like that with you.
Yeah, sage and Palo Santo are like the easy ones. Like if you've got it, and especially if you're awake, you can do this. For me, what I was noticing is that they would come and disrupt me while I was sleeping. And then of course your guard's down because you're unconscious, like you're busy trying to rest. So I think the easiest thing is that when you are regularly tuning into your energy, you can feel when things are off a lot easier. Whereas sometimes it has to be pretty extreme before we notice that the energy is shifted, because we're just not tuned in. So we need to wait till something is a bit more extreme. So having a regular practice where you can just have that fine-tuned awareness of like what your vibe is and what your space feels like is kind of like your baseline in terms of what you need to do. A lot of people know about the practice about enveloping themselves in like a bubble or a ball of light. The downside is that they do that and then they haven't cleared the energy first. So they basically just say like, oh, hey, come on over here. We're going to make a little cocoon for the two of us, rather than actually like protecting themselves from anything. So what I like to do, and this sounds so funny, but I imagine myself where I bring source down, like source energy down through my crown into my heart. And then did you guys have the Care Bears where you are?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay, so I basically will Care Bear stare source energy out and through my house, and then I'll bubble up. And so I like a golden light as a bubble, but sometimes it also feels nice to have it kind of iridescent, and it feels almost like unicorny and or a little bit more elemental. It kind of just depends on what your vibe is, but it's always clear the energy first. And then actually lock it down, rather than sealing yourself in with whoever has been visiting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's very cool. So you can do it without any tools. Like all you have to do is use the actual energy that you have and vibrate it out.
Yeah, I think we kind of get this idea that like this work is for the chosen few. And if you haven't done your attunements and your training and whatever, that you can't do that. Like we are powerful beings. So we can invoke things simply with intention and declaration. And so if you pair that with, the power of visualization and really commanding your space and your energy, like we can 100% do that with intention. It doesn't have to be something we're trained how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that my normal thing is if the energy feels off, I'll just be like, get out. And just like, that's it. I'll just be like, get out. I claim my power as a sovereign being, and you need to leave.
And that's the great thing. I think we forget, first of all, that we have free will. Like, I think there's this belief of like, if you can feel them or hear them or see them, you have to engage. Absolutely not. Like free will is like the biggest gift that we've been given. And second of all, is that you get to decide the terms. The first time when I started to actually feel entities, I remember saying, I don't know if you're friendly or not, but whatever you are, you're scaring the crap out of me. You need to go.
Ooh. Yeah.
And then it left. And that was the end of that. Now I thought, oh, I didn't know I could just say so. Because no one tells you that, right?
Yeah.
So you're right, though, just making that declaration. But I also like the idea, like I would use that as the first step of the clearing, and then I would still bubble up after you've sent them packing just to make sure.
No, I'll definitely be doing that now, because I will just go, get out, this is my space. And then, yeah, I don't do anything afterwards. So that's probably why they keep coming back. Yeah.
And it is something you have to do over and over again. Like I probably do it more often than is like needed, but you know, it'll be a new entity might decide to try to visit, right? And I don't mean that in any kind of scary way. Often they're friendly, especially if you command your space where only things that are friendly, loving, and in support of your highest and greatest good have the ability to communicate with you. Like everything else is going to stay away anyhow. You know, someone new might hang around, so you got to reestablish the boundary a little bit.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that people don't realize is that if you do have an entity that is bad vibes hanging off you, it will drain your energy and drain your life force, essentially.
And you know, the thing is, sometimes we think about entities as like something dark that has come across, and that's possible, but I actually think that that's rarer than we think. Oftentimes those things that are kind of hooking onto us and draining us are cords of attachment. So they are either the way that we have a relationship with other people, particularly when there's emotional or energetic codependence. And also when we are bitchy and judgmental and like projecting our thoughts and feelings on people, or when they're doing that to us, cords of attachment are formed. So again, because I work with angels, I work with Archangel Michael, who has this gorgeous sword of light, and I ask him to cut the cords in front of me, behind me, to my left, to my right, above me, and below me. And I literally see like shing, 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 as they just kind of like cut off. And then I can take a deep breath. And then I'm like, okay, I know that in this moment, I'm energetically sovereign. And when I'm actually like good with my practices, which isn't often, but when I am, it's something I do first thing in the morning and again before bed, so that I'm having an entire day where it's just me and my energy, and I'm sovereign.
Wow, that's really cool. I have tried to do the cord cutting thing, but I definitely missed a few steps there because I just did the ones in front, did the ones behind, but forgot everywhere else.
Yeah, because they get into like the sneakiest parts, right? And like you'll start to notice it because you're like, I'm sleeping really well and I'm eating well and I'm hydrated. Why am I so sluggish? Why am I so drained? And like, you know, there are other causes like low iron and depression and a whole bunch of other things. But like if you've ticked all the boxes and you're still feeling that drained, there is a chance that there's like a little hook that's in there that you just got to get out and set free. And also you're doing them a favor. You're giving them back their energy too.
Absolutely. Yeah, people forget that, you know, you've got to give them back their energy and you'll get yours back. And it's so nice to have it all back.
Although they will feel it. That's the only thing to keep in mind, because sometimes, you know, especially if it's like an ex-lover or something, they will suddenly be like, oh, I need to reach out. And sometimes the people you're cutting off are not people you want to engage with. So you just gotta use that friendly little block button and then you're fine. But just be aware that sometimes they will feel it.
And what do you find come up the most when you're working with people?
So I think the biggest theme that we work around is people pleasing. If we look at like the archetypes that you and I have studied, they are often people who are presenting themselves as nurturers in the world. I have met one true nurturer. The majority of people who I've met who identify as nurturers are actually people pleasers. They have been conditioned to pick up these traits of nurturing and caring for someone else and deprioritizing themselves. But truly, they want to shine in these different ways. They just didn't realize that that was an option. And they kind of thought that this is just who they were. And until you actually dig a little deeper and ask the questions, they're just living the way that they've been trained to live as opposed to who they actually came into this world to be.
Ooh, I'm a bit triggered there.
Sorry.
No.
I say it with love, and there's no judgment because I've been there too, like 100%.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser. I remember doing the archetype test in DCI and was like, nurturer? That's weird. Why am I a nurturer? I mean, granted, at the time I was nannying for some little girls. So yeah, there was
that can be in our work. It can be in like when we're in caretaking roles in our family. Like, you know, sometimes someone has to take care of people. Somebody has to do that role. But it's like, is this the role that you're doing, or is this who you are? And I think that's the distinction. We get caught up in the doing and not the being.
And how do you get that person from the place of doing to being?
So the first part is actually getting clear on, if there was no obligations, if there was no attachments and expectations of you, and there was no, like, money is no object, time is no object, the world is your oyster, what do you want to do? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world? What are the traits in other women that you go like, oh, I wish I had that? What are the traits that you judge in other women because secretly you wish you had that? You know what I mean? All these different levels. So it's peeling back these layers of not just conditioning, but everything. We kind of take for granted that this is all there is, what we're living right now. And so when they enter into the space of everything being possible, it starts to bring a lot more clarity in who they are and who they want to become. Once we have that, then we can start to make plans of like what needs to shift, what needs to change, what needs to make room for these other ways of being. But it's a touchy thing, especially when, you know, children are involved or their spouses. Like, people are used to us showing up in the way that we always have. And so whenever we completely flip the script, like, it impacts the people around us.
And I think as humans, we have such an attachment to labels and putting people in boxes and saying, you acted like this and you were like this, you can't change, that's who you are. And it's so untrue, because, you know, we live this human life to evolve and grow and transform constantly.
It's funny because you say that, and if we peel back like the emotion of what's underneath those words, what they're saying is, I'm afraid that my needs aren't going to get met anymore. And then it becomes, why is it my responsibility to meet your needs? Dang, right?
Oh, mic drop.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, that's the way that it's always been, but that means that there's negotiation for something else. We don't have to keep showing up in that way if it's only benefiting one person, right? And, you know, sometimes there isn't the time or the money. So then it's like, okay, great. Well, like, where do we have, you know, excess? Where are we prioritizing things that maybe aren't actually that important? You know what I mean? Like, maybe, especially if you find yourself where you are investing a lot of time and energy and money in like keeping up with the neighbors and making sure that you have the prettiest house on the block and whatever, it was like, does that actually serve your highest good? Is that who you want to be? And if not, if so, then have at her. But if not, how could you redirect those resources into like being more of yourself?
Whew, my mind is blown with that one. And I think just going back to the whole jealousy thing, because that's been a theme that I've just noticed coming through a lot. And I think it's so fascinating when you do flip the script on why you feel jealous, why you're judging other people. And especially, I know in Australia, we have tall poppy syndrome over here. So we like to cut people down. We don't like people to grow above anyone else. Success is not okay over here. And I just wanted to ask you, like, have you found that to be a common thing?
I mean, some people like don't want to be the tall poppy. Some people like do naturally like shrink back a little bit. But a lot of times, and I would throw myself in this, like, I was teased about being really sparkly and loud. And I was a 2 girl. I was too loud, too bossy, too whatever. And they'd be like, oh, she's such a Leo. I came from a family of Scorpios. And so the fact that I was a Leo was just like, ugh. And it was like, no, I'm outgoing. I'm gregarious. I like to perform. Like there were all these like really beautiful traits in me that I had turned down because I kind of felt shitty about them. Like I felt like it wasn't good to be the center of attention or whatever. And yet at the same time, whenever someone needed to get the conversation moving, or if someone needed, you know, to be like that facilitator and the one who brought everyone together, well, that was still me. I was still, you know what I mean? It was like those same skills that I was being criticized for were the things that they also relied on me to do. And so in this re-becoming of myself, I was able to be like, you know what? Yeah, I am totally going to be that loud, bold person. And like, that's okay. And you know what? It's not going to be right for some people. And that's also okay because it's true to me. And recently I bought 2 different gold sequin jackets. One's like gold, one's rose gold. And when they arrived, I thought, what am I doing? Like, what am I going to do with this? It's a pandemic. Where am I going to wear this? I put it on and I wore it to the mailbox. I like walked a block away, strutting down the street in my gold sparkly coat. And it was amazing. And like, you know, 3 years ago, there's no way, even with all the work I had done, there's no way that I would have been like, bold enough to just randomly wear sequins down the street on like a Tuesday. And now whatever, like I'd rather be me and be bold and not be liked for it than pretend to be somebody else to be accepted.
Oof. Yes, speak on that. Oh, I love that so much. That's so cool that you wore it down the street. Just the most glittery person walking down the street to get her mail. Oh, so extra.
And I'm brand new to the neighborhood too. So I'm sure there were people who were like, who is that? Mm-hmm. Why is she twinkling in the sun? And well, absolutely, because it was Tuesday and a new package came in and here we are. Let's do this.
Yeah. And I think we forget is that people will project their own fears onto us. So there'll be some people that, yeah, they don't want the gold sparkly jacket, but there's some people that do secretly want the gold sparkly jacket and project their fear of, oh my God, if I wore a gold sparkly jacket on a Tuesday to get my mail, people would judge me. I would not feel safe. I'd feel uncomfortable, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, because I mean, oftentimes it has nothing to do with the coat, but it's about like what's underneath it. The confidence, the bold self-expression, like these are enviable traits, right? And the thing is that we have the feeling, but we don't necessarily have the understanding underneath it. We haven't done the work to say, oh, I wish I had the confidence to wear something, maybe not a sparkly jacket, but something loud and bold that's going to grab attention. And we don't know that. We just know like, oh my God, I can't believe she's wearing that. I feel like in many ways, I'm like a recovered mean girl because I know I've been the one who has those thoughts about somebody. I have been the one who's criticized. And now it's like, yeah, okay, cool. I am secure enough with myself that someone can criticize me and it doesn't actually shake the foundation of who I am.
Oh, I love how you put
most
that.
Days. Most days.
Yeah. Most days. Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, we're all human. And yeah, I love how you said recovering mean girl, because that feels so accurate, because you look back and you go, oh, that's who I was before I healed.
Yeah, after that point, I had to go a step further of why was I like that? And that's when I started to recognize that girls are pitted against each other and we carry that into womanhood. And if we don't have really great relationships with our sisters or our moms, then that gets added onto it, right? So really what we have, oftentimes I feel like the root is the mom. So what we have is what appears to be like this war among women, but really it's women who didn't get properly nurtured by their mothers, who weren't properly nurtured by their mothers. And we're perpetuating the cycle. And then you throw in the patriarchy and everything else. And it really is like a system for us, being at each other's throats instead of being like, wait a minute, if we could just recognize how friggin' powerful we are, we could band together and take over the world. But we haven't worked that part out yet. We're getting there.
We're getting there bit by bit. It's so true. And have you heard back in the day when witches were a thing and we were essentially pitted against each other then because we'd have to dob each other in. And apparently there's like this scar that lives on it in a lot of women from way back then. And I find that super fascinating.
I think that's probably the most extreme example that we have of that. But I mean, we saw that, even in World War II, where people were turning in their neighbors and stuff for being Jewish. Like we have had many points in history where it's like self-preservation. If you're looking over at her, you're not criticizing, thinking, judging, hurting me. And so we are constantly selling each other out. And, we have to get to a place where we recognize that like, we don't have to do it that way anymore. Like we are not in war times. We are not burning people at the stake. How about if we just like mind our own business a little bit, celebrate other people a whole lot more, and then like stop pitting ourselves against each other because we are way more powerful when we do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And in such a crucial time, that is such a beautiful note. We are stronger together. And at the end of the day, we're humans and we need community.
Yeah, I think the pandemic made some people feel like, oh yeah, I can do this all by myself. And that was probably great for about 3 months. And then there was that recognition, even for the most introverted of us, that recognition of like, actually things are better when I have someone that I can talk through this hard time with, when I can pool together resources with other people, when I can ride out the storm with people who think and feel and act the way that I do, so that we're in this like cohesive little family, whether it's, blood related or not, and we're getting through a hard time together rather than internalizing that story of I have to do this all myself.
Absolutely. And end of the day, we get to pick who our family is. It's not always just blood. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. And so if anyone wants to work with you, Where will they find you?
If they head over to my website, which is seryna.ca, there are free resources there. There is a blog that has a bunch of information as well, and all of the offerings that I have. So one-on-one programs, groups, on-demand stuff, everything is there. I am most often on Instagram. I'm at Seryna Myers. And I also host a Facebook community called Being You, which is really just a safe space for you to show up exactly as you are, not be judged, and to be doing the work of questioning, who am I and why do I do these things and what do I desire?
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that you have a Facebook group called Being You.
The more clarity that I have in my own journey, the more I'm able to bring that for other people as well.
Because once we do the work on the inside, it just vibrates out into the world.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for coming on with me today and having this chat. It has been so beautiful and went so quickly, but thank you so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you today.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.